Welcome everyone. My name is Alan Laframboise. I'm a software engineer and designer. I work primarily on the developer website and the dev labs. And today we're going to be talking about designing apps with Calcite Maps. So all of my slides are on slides.com/alaframboise. So there's resource links and so forth that I click out to, then you can go and find everything there. So just a show of hands, how many people either are using or have used Calcite Maps in the past? Folks? Okay. How many people have been to this or a similar presentation before specific to Calcite Maps? Couple. All right. Yeah, I saw a few cool applications when I was working near the island. Had some folks come by, and it's neat to see some applications out in the wild now. See some people have adopted the platform and are using it. But just as a quick review, the Calcite is really like a design system that Esri put together, and you could think about it in a similar sense to material design. So the same thing that Google put together to basically drive and steer their design in a unified direction. So it's a design system, and it's based on principles and patterns. It's a guide. It helps us with branding guidelines, and of course it's geocentric. At the core of Calcite, when the project first started, the key to the project was defining color. And then what sort of icons and symbology were we going to use to define the buttons and the interfaces for all of the products. All the things you see here, ArcGIS Pro as an example, has a whole new ribbon, of course, with new buttons and so forth on it. Then there are some web products that are starting to adopt Calcite and have adopted it so far. The ArcGIS 4X API has adopted Calcite as well. And then there's other projects out there too, location analytics and specific cartography projects that are basing their entire design around Calcite. So it's something specific to Esri, but there's a lot of pieces here that could help you out, that's for sure. And I just want to show you the color model. So this is basically just a set of colors that have a good solid contrast between the dark and the light font on there. Also a set of gray core colors at the bottom with, again, good contrast with a light gray with a dark font, and then as you move across to the darker gray with the lighter foreground color. So that's basically the core of Calcite is the color spectrum. So that's important, especially when you're looking at accessibility. This could be a handy chart if you're just looking to come up with colors and to define them for applications you're working on. The easiest way to kind of synthesize Calcite is to look at something called Calcite Web. So Calcite Web is a web framework similar to Bootstrap. It was designed by Esri, and it provides all the good things you would expect a web framework to provide. So for example, it has the colors and the fonts and the icons, but it's more than that. There's a grid system as well associated with it, and it's super lightweight and fast and performant as well. Okay, so let's take a look at Calcite Web. So this is on GitHub. This is our standard GitHub site for Esri, and what I'm going to do is jump right into the documentation and step you through a few things that you might find helpful. So for the type, so this is important. This whole thing is a design guide, and it's really nice because even myself, when I start new projects, I consider this like a toolbox. So I can go to this toolbox, and I know I can pick pieces out of it, and they're all going to fit together nicely. So if you work for an organization or if you're a consulting organization, then I'm hoping you have a toolbox like this at your disposal, because it really makes design more efficient, and you don't have to think about things because they've already been thought about. So for typefaces, we use Avenir. Avenir Next is what we use. Not that you have to use it, but it's what we use to keep a straight line on everything. We have a grid system that uses 24 columns, which is quite a bit different than Bootstrap and some of the other ones, which use half, if not less. We spent a lot of time on icons, and we share these icons everywhere, so you can get the SVGs at any point in time, and you can use the icon set. It's actually built into the fonts. So if you're building web applications with the 4X API, you have all these fonts at your disposal. So there's really neat things in here like base maps and collections and layer lists, download, etc. So this is free to use. It's at your disposal. All you need to do is bring in the font set. And then for colors, we took a little bit of a look earlier, but if you want to get the actual hex vals, then you can take a look at the grayscales, and this is always nice, right? When you want to pick different levels of gray shades, as an example, you just go grab these hex vals. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to guess. And these are staggered incrementally at a nice distance, so you're going to get things like from white to lighter gray. You're going to get a pretty solid offset. So that's nice. And then the other UI colors, which are basically listed out here. This is only just a subset. Then there's a bunch of components with all the typical suspects, like things like buttons, right, with their sizes, other components. Some of the more interesting ones, I think, are the cards. So we have these different card layouts, and cards are kind of a big part of web design now. You see them on a lot of different websites, and it's just a nice way to compartmentalize information so you can focus. So we have different layouts for those, and of course the div elements and the CSS required to put those together. We have different pattern examples, so when people want to go build like an overview page or a sign-in page, then we have like little stubs for that. So I don't need to show you too much about Calcite Web, because if you visit Esri.com or the developer site, it's built with Calcite Web, right? So if you ever want to build something like that, this is the framework we use. It's here. It's at your disposal. It works fine. You can take or leave different pieces of it. You can rebuild it if you want. It's a SaaS build model, so you can do whatever you want and look at these different examples as well. Last thing I wanted to point you to are some of the guides. This is something that I think helps every organization, and that is putting together HTML, CSS, and JavaScript style guides. So we spent some time doing some research, and we came up with a preference that really works for us, just on spacing and layout and so forth. And they're really simple. Like for CSS, for example, don't lay out your selectors like this. Stack them like this, and then what is the priority and the order of things, declaration order, it's positioning, the model, the topography and appearance, and then whatever kind of jazz or extras at the end. So I guarantee you, if you've done CSS work before, you've had this question, do I declare the display first, or do I do the z-index next? This stuff just kind of keeps everybody in alignment. It's not that you have to use it, but we've done the research on it, and this really works well for us. And the same thing here with some JavaScript guidelines. So again, Calcite Web is part of the larger Calcite family of things, and it's available. It's at your disposal if you would like to use it. We use it for internal projects. It's helpful. It helps keep everybody kind of walking a straight path. And there's something else out there called Calcite Bootstrap that you might be familiar with. And we have some products like the Open Data product that basically is built on top of Calcite Bootstrap. And so different teams use different things, but it's still, at its core, it's still Calcite. So it still has the same look and feel, same colors, fonts. There's a light theme and a dark theme. There's a Dojo and a jQuery version as well. And if we just go out to the GitHub site and look at it, it's going to look very similar to Calcite Web, except this is Bootstrap. So this is a theme that sits on top of Bootstrap, and if you're familiar with Bootstrap, it's very easy to theme, and we just kind of made it look and use the fonts that we were familiar with and so forth. So it's got all the usual suspects like the buttons. They look exactly the same as we saw the buttons earlier in Calcite Web. We could go down and look at some additional things that we've added. Let me go over to components. Let's see, color. Yeah, so here are the colors. So we've added these color styles in SAS as well, which we've seen before. The type is Avenir, which we know. And then here are some examples of different patterns to implement. So here's the Bootstrap version of the Calcite web that we just looked at. So now we're using Bootstrap column, extra small 12, the things that we might be used to already. So there are cards, again. So these are extensions of just the Bootstrap system itself. So these are additional components. There was a question.
Hey, just real quick, are you using the Bootstrap icons on this one or your icons?
Our icons, yes. And you have the option, right? Sometimes I mix them. Sometimes I find an icon that's helpful, in the Bootstrap side, and I'll borrow that icon for some of the work that I'm doing. But for the most part, if we don't have an icon, then we definitely should have it there for, if you're doing any kind of mapping app development. So that's Calcite Bootstrap. That's available. You can use that to build web mapping applications. You can use it to build web pages. When you would use it is probably if you're already a Bootstrap developer and you're looking for a framework, or you just want to use that, or it's been mandated by a particular customer to use it, then you could integrate with it and then integrate the maps on top of that. All right, so finally, start talking about Calcite in the context of maps. So Calcite Maps is a project that I put together, and it's built on Bootstrap. And it's a very lightweight theme that's designed to help you design modern mapping apps. It's a very lightweight framework, so there's only a couple components to it. It borrows from the design principles of Calcite. So there's square edges, and the color themes and fonts and icons and so forth are all borrowed from Calcite. It works with any web framework. It doesn't matter. You can put any mapping system inside of it. It's agnostic. It's just a div container waiting for a map at the end of the day. The rest of the components just talk to it. And then, of course, it works for desktop and mobile as well. So the objective is to be fast and easy and super simple. So for those people that aren't familiar with Bootstrap, we'll just go to the 3x version for now, because that's what it's built on today. And we have all the CSS stuff that we would expect in Bootstrap, like the buttons. And these are the default. The default theme is basically the gray background, and of course they have some colors set up and so forth. So what Calcite Maps does is it replaces these blue, greens, and so forth with the Calcite colors. And then as far as components, again, we're just talking about the icons, so you're welcome to integrate these icons. They're available if you choose to build them into the system and use them. Other helpful things are things like nav bars. So, we can nav across, and then get into the components of Bootstrap. And I think this is one of the reasons a lot of people use Bootstrap is so they can actually, let me go to JavaScript here, and look at things like buttons and collapse. So, for example, it has these components built in, where you can actually, click on things and they'll expand and contract. So these are all small components built into Bootstrap. So that's Bootstrap in just a few minutes. And of course, if you've already used it, then you've seen this before. But if you're new to it, then it's just a framework. And basically, Calcite Maps only borrows a few components from Bootstrap. It's 3 components. There's a header, sort of title bar at the top, and it accepts nav items on the right-hand side, which is the same as Bootstrap. And then there's a drop-down menu, and then there's a panel. The panel is actually a collection of panels. It's as many as you want to put in, or if you just want one, you can just go with one, or if you don't want any panels, you don't need them. So those are the 3 very simple parts to the entire framework. The rest of Bootstrap is there, but if you're using the build system that Calcite Maps provides, then you're going to have a minified small version of the build. So that's the nice thing about Bootstrap is they give you the SAS. So I grabbed the SAS and I removed all of the components that I didn't need. So it's a super lightweight version. But if you have a build of Bootstrap that you want to use, or you want to use something that's on the CDN, this will also work with standard Bootstrap. Okay, so there is a build of Bootstrap locally, but don't be terrified by it because it's just smaller and faster and lighter weight. And you're welcome to use your own as well. So those are the components. Probably the easiest way to explore is to use this thing called the Style Explorer, but we'll just back up for a second here. So I'm just looking at the Calcite Maps repo, again, in the Esri GitHub account, and I've just went to this sort of design page here. So it has a few items in it, and we'll start by looking at this thing called Style Explorer. So these are the components, right? We were just talking about the top title bar and some of the nav components. So of course, this is going to support 2D and 3D. And again, those are just the Bootstrap nav components. That top highlight bar for accessibility is a Calcite pattern that has been added to this. So that's not a standard Bootstrap thing. It's just been extended a little bit. So the nav bar is the top thing. And you'll notice on the right-hand side, too, that one of the search widgets here has been extended. So by default, the search widget doesn't have this sort of rubber banding experience. So Calcite Maps provides that for you, which is kind of nice. Then you have the drop-down menu. So if I want, I can take advantage of one of Bootstrap's components, and that is this modal component. So I can show this if I want, or I can just use like the standard panels. So as I click on each one of these items, it's going to open up a different panel. So we got all these guys in here. Then I can go to the settings panel. And this application here is designed to show you what you can do with Calcite Map styles. All right, so what this application is doing is applying styles to different div elements within the framework. That's all it's doing. It's like 99% CSS. So let's take a little tour, if you will. So we can just give this map a name. So we can just call this my map. This is my map. And that's just showing you basically how to change the title bar in the title. If we want, we can go to the map. We can change our location. For example, look for something like Palm Springs. I'll zoom this in here. I can also load a web map if I have a web map handy. That's a feature I just added about 3 hours ago. And then we have themes. So now we're starting to get into the core things. So the core Calcite map items. So there's a light theme. If we want, we can go with a light theme, or we can go with the dark theme. Or we can pick one of the Calcite colors and start walking through them, because we've already seen a few examples. So for example, I could pick dark blue. I don't have to theme everything. If I don't want, I can just theme the top bar. Or if I'm looking for more of an aggressive design, more aggressive branding, then I can theme the panels as well. And again, all I'm doing is I'm adding a Calcite dark blue CSS to the top of the panels, and it just makes its way down the entire hierarchy. So we have all these neat colors that we can experiment with. We have some transparency as well, and that's going to work for some cases and not others. The oranges, and then let's leave it, I guess, a purple for now. Okay, and of course you can change from like a dark text to a light text at any point you want, or you can change the widgets from dark to light as well. So those are pre-compiled themes, if you will, that are built in. And if you're not into the Calcite colors, you can always go to more colors, and you can really make some interesting designs here. So I have a little algorithm in there that's trying to figure out which color that you're picking, and it's going to offset and pick either a dark or a light text, but you can always override it at any point in time. So, okay. So we'll leave it there for now. Okay, so those are basically that's just Calcite in action, providing some themes and some colors. So how can we affect our mapping application? So what we can do is we can move the UI around quite drastically if we want. So we basically inverted everything here in this point. If we want, we can float everything and float the application up there. Now that probably only makes sense when you're floating. When you have something like a little bit of transparency. then you can kind of see through a little bit. So that's actually not too bad of a design. And then there's other layouts too that are defined. So, you know, we can make the top super small, or if we wanted to do something like, it's called inline left. So basically we're floating and making it inline left. So we can swap the panel from the left to the right if we want. That's just, again, just adding a different class will accomplish that. And yeah, let me show you the drop-down menu. So we'll go back to one of the views here. Let's say we'll pick top large. And we'll change the menu, because right now the menu is just a standard kind of drop-down. We can change that to a drawer, so you have this sort of drawer effect. So these are some of the basic things. This is Calcite Maps, just these three components, adding these styles, giving you these different design options and so forth. All right, so if you want to get started, then let's get started. I'll show you, again, we'll just go back to the repository here, and I'm just going to grab the sample code, which is the required HTML and CSS links, and I'll step you through it. So we can grab this. And get one of these guys set up. I'll make the font a little bigger. Okay, so I'll step you through what's going on here. So basically, we've got a reference to Calcite Maps Bootstrap, and that's my custom build of Bootstrap, which you can take or leave. You do not have to use it. In this case, it's just a smaller, easier system to use for me. And then there's a reference to some of the overrides that are specific to the ArcGIS 4X API. And there's also one for 3X, and there's also one for Leaflet, Esri Leaflet. And then, of course, a reference to the main CSS for 4.7, 4.6, 4.7, doesn't matter. Now we're starting to get into the Calcite stuff. So we have a theme defined at the top, and the nav is top. And here we have text, light, and dark. So if we want, we can actually grab this and flip those around. And then that changes our header to be light now in this particular case. If we want, we can actually take it a step further, and we can do something like background color, dark blue. And then we can change the text back to light to get a better contrast. So you see how it works. That's all that the styler application was doing, was applying these styles in the particular div elements at the right locations. The other things that are in here are the navigation. So this is the drop down. So this is the UL with the LIs. So that's our drop down menu here. We've got an about, a legend, and then a full map. And full map is kind of nice because it basically removes the nav bar at the top, just temporarily if you want to provide a more immersive mobile experience. And then as we go down, we have the map. So the map is defined here, and then we have the panels as well. Right now the panels are light and dark, so we can swap that. We can do text, dark, and background light. So that makes this light, and if we want to take that even a step further, we can make it the same color that we made it up here by grabbing this class. And we'll go back to light again. Okay. So the other thing too that you probably have noticed is the panels will contract and expand, and you can pick them of course, accordingly here. And in this particular panel, it actually has a legend widget in it. So when the application starts, we create a legend widget, and we have a legend div here, and that legend div just sits up in one of the panels up above. So here it is, right here. So code's a little bit squished, but it's not as complicated as it looks. And you notice that the panels are also going to be responsive, and they're also going to work synchronously with the pop-up. So if the pop-up docks itself and undocks itself, then it's going to synchronize itself accordingly. Okay? So those are all of the little things that the panels do and that Calcite Maps gives you in terms of trying to make the interface be a little bit more responsive and work better. So again, docked, the panel hides; undocked, the panel shows. So that's really the nuts and bolts of putting this together. It's nothing more than defining the drop-down menu. You saw some of the styles that we changed as well, and then adding as many or as few panels as you want. So for every panel, of course, you need a controller, which is a nav item up top in this drop-down menu. So you'd add a new nav item, and then you'd add a panel at the same time. And you just basically link them up. There's no coding involved there. There's no JavaScript coding or anything other than just pasting in HTML, and we can build this out. Okay? Because Bootstrap has taken care of the correlation between the item IDs between the nav and the panels. So it's pretty straightforward. If you haven't used it before, definitely, don't be shy, don't be scared of it. That's really about as complex as you need to get. And of course, there's more dev options if you want. You have the Sass locally. You can recompile the Sass steps. You just fork, bower, npm, grunt, and that's going to build you your own local CSS file. And the nice thing is, you can actually get into the build modules, and you can start commenting out the Bootstrap modules that you don't want. You can even remove more of them that I haven't removed. Okay. So again, the whole idea is to make this super lightweight and fast. You don't want your framework to be adding a lot of baggage. So we'll finish up this section of Calcite Maps. Back to the samples again. I just want to show you some of the other things. So we looked at the Style Explorer already. This is an example in 3x. So this is the 3x library. Each one of these samples has the styles that were used to style it. So this is nav top, inline left, dark purple, calcite panels right. So it's telling you how to actually build this thing, but of course you could go to the code just as easily. Go back here. This is another example. This one here uses the 4x API, and it's basically setting the drawer style for the menu drop-down. So again, you could go to the info, and it's also using a background custom in this particular case, and it's using the Calcite menu drawer. So each sample tells you how to set it up. The last example here is with Esri leaflet. And again, the panels in the framework don't care. They're just there doing their thing, and then the mapping framework and the mapping div is basically the essence of the application. So we still have a search bar that's embedded here. So, but there are some things that I do for you. For example, I have the search bar pop up instead of pop down when the nav bar is at the bottom. So there's all kinds of little helper things in there that you'll come across. Okay, so that's Calcite Maps. Built on top of Bootstrap, 3 components, super simple. It's driven by styles. You add styles to different elements, and then that's how you position things, and that's how you make it work. Question?
On your Style Explorer, once you get a style that you like, is there a way to like generate?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I get that question a lot. And so not without introspecting. So if you set up an app with Style Explorer, in a perfect world, you'd hit export and then you'd hit import, and it would just work. But I'm going to show you something else that kind of achieves that. Okay. So right now the answer is no, but you can always introspect to see the styles that you have set going through it. You'd have to introspect using the browser. So it's a manual process. That's just using Calcite Maps today. So let me introduce you to something else called Styler. So Styler is, it's a new configurable app template, released this last year, and it's 2D and 3D compatible, and it's built on top of Calcite Maps. So has anyone, just a show of hands, has anyone built their own configurable app template before? Okay. But you're familiar with configurable app templates, right? You go to the map viewer, you're in the map viewer, and then you spin it out as one of the configurable app templates. So it sits in there. So it's easy to create these applications and also share them. So what can you do with it? Well, let's take a look. So we'll start with the map viewer here. And we've just loaded up the 7 natural wonders of the world. So I'm going to go share this out. I'm going to create a web app. And I'm going to search for Styler because we've got quite a few of them now. And you'll see that there's a 2D and a 3D version of Styler. All right, so give this a name. And now, so what this means is that there's an instance of the Styler application running in the cloud. And I'll show you what you can do with that in a second. So this is your basic layout, right? And it should look very familiar, right? We were just looking at this essentially in the Style Explorer. So we can start fleshing this out a little more. So we can go to our About panel here, and we can add text like 7 wonders, something like that. And then we can go to the theme, and then we have the typical suspects. We have dark, light, the widgets. We can also do dark, light. We have some preset colors. Again, we can change this to purple if we want, or we can pick custom colors, so you can always do the override. And we can apply them to the headers and the panels if we want. So we'll just save this, and it's going to spin this up. And here's the interesting thing, is it's basically setting a set of parameters to the app, and the app is configuring itself by adding all of the styles to it on the fly. So keep that in mind. So other things we can do here. We can go to the layout. Again, we can set it from top to bottom, so we can flip it around just like before. Except now we have the ability to add and remove widgets if we want. So if we want to change like the docking position, or we want to change where the zoom widget is, or the home. So we can go through any of these. We want to show the coordinates widget. The coordinates widget is this guy down here, which is super handy. I'll show you that in a second. And then we get to the other options, and this is all about panels. So right now we have the About panel that's showing, but we can change this application by, if you have slides and bookmark set, let's do this. So we'll save it, and now it should activate the bookmarks. So what that means is I can move around the world, and I can kind of go through, they're either slides or bookmarks. In the scene, they're called slides. In the 2D world, they're called bookmarks. So this is just a little component that I put together. Again, this is just something that's built on top of Calcite Maps. So you won't find this in Calcite Maps. You're only going to find this in the Styler because the code is built just into there for this particular app. But it does all the other things that I showed you earlier. We can expand and contract all the views or all of the panels. And if we want, we can actually override the application and the default setting. So this is the default setting, the default extent as an example. If I want, I can go in here, and here's the way to use this little control. You can do lots of neat things with it. So you can copy the content out of there, and that's my current latitude and longitude. But let's go somewhere like Palm Springs. And now we're going to have a new latitude and longitude and a new zoom level. And this little control is telling you what zoom level you're at. So I can just paste this in here. And I'm just going to grab the parts that I need. So there's the latitude. And then there's the longitude. And then my zoom level is 14, so I can put 14 in here. And now when I save, it's going to override the web map settings now, and it's going to give me my extent. So, question? Yeah. We're getting there. But you guys are figuring it out. So, and you're going to see why I didn't do the other thing with the Style Explorer. Okay. So you get the point. So basically, I can configure this application, and I get all the benefits of it being a responsive application and so forth. And it's called Styler, and it's built into the ArcGIS framework. Okay, so that's one of the things you can do. But here's one of the super cool things you can do. So at this point, I'm just hitting the Styler template living in the ArcGIS cloud, because all of the templates have to be hosted, and you can access their endpoints any point in time. So we can do some interesting things now. So I could come here, I could put in Palm Springs, we can go to the airport, there we are. Okay, and so right away, you should notice something else, that I actually have the ability to find places. So in this case, I look for parks, or I can look for restaurants. Let's just move down the street a little bit. And the other thing that this has built into it is I can actually do what's called a long tap. So if I just long tap on the map, it's going to keep searching for restaurants anywhere that I want. And that's just using our geocoder. And it's searching for places, and I'm filtering by restaurants. You could look for coffee shops, you can look for gas stations, whatever you want. And that's just functionality built into the Styler template. Okay, so we'll go back here to the Renaissance. It's cool. All right, so now what I'm going to show you is the share window over here. So the share window is basically compiling whatever the state of the application is. So if I zoom in, these parameters change. If I zoom out a little bit, then the parameters change back. So what that means is I can actually start building this application on the fly. So if I want, I can set the title to Palm Springs, and I can set the subtitle. I know you can't see this, but that's why I'm reading it out. To Conference Center. And if I want, I can just apply at this point. Now I have Palm Springs Conference Center. So I'm not even using the map viewer to build this template. I'm actually just using parameters, right? So if you're kind of getting what I'm putting down here, is we can basically build this application on the fly. So we can do something like background color equals dark blue. We can do layout equals bottom. We can do active panel equals the about panel. And then we can do the about text equals hello everyone. So let's do that, and if I haven't made any typos, we'll see how much it's changed their interface around. So we have our about window up here. We're actually able to insert text into the about window on the fly. So imagine this kind of application like in an emergency scenario where you don't even have time to build a web map, and you just want to style and send a web map to somebody with some information. Then it's totally possible to do all of this just on the fly. So I think I forgot a dash in here. Let me just apply that. There we go. And we can theme the whole thing. So that's cool. It gets even better, believe it or not. So because this is just sitting in the cloud, what I can do is I can change some of the parameters to like the default, the web scene equals default, because right now it's defaulting to the web map. So I can do that. Let me just hit enter. So now we're looking at this in a 3D view. And all I did was change the default web map to web scene. And again, this parameter is universal. And then of course I can refine this a little bit. So I can change the view and the perspective. And if I'm happy with that, I'm going to change one more thing here too as well. I'm going to put theme equals custom, and then that's going to theme the panels as well. And let's apply this. Let's see how close we can get. So there it is. So there's a fully designed and themed application from command line parameters that are built into Styler. Okay, so Styler knows how to parse the string, and it's going to throw out the ones that aren't good, and it's going to keep the ones that are. And it allows you to build these applications. And that's all that the map viewer is doing. When you go through the config panel in the map viewer, it's basically allowing you to compile all the parameters. But it's kind of like a super app builder because you can do it on the fly. So that's fully released. That's out there today. And if you're wondering about those parameters that I was typing in, again, it's another repo. It's called Calcite Maps Styler Template because that's exactly what it is. And when you scroll down, you can look at different examples of apps and how they've been styled on the fly, again, just with parameters in your browser. And when you get far enough down, then you start to get a parameter listing. So we have rotation, scale, the base map, the subtitle, the title, the theme, colors, the menus that you want shown. The list is all here. So these are all valid parameters that it will accept. So just a bit early, but I know everybody's anxious to get going. So just a few final notes. So Calcite is the design system that we built and follow at Esri. Calcite Maps is an extension of that, built on Bootstrap. It's a lightweight design framework. You can grab Calcite Maps and build something from the ground up, or you can jump to Styler and just, theme applications on the fly if you want. And of course, you can get all of the resources here at slides.com/framboise. And I encourage you to submit some session feedback. And that's it. Enjoy the party tonight. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take questions. Yes. That one there? Sure. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the presentation you gave yesterday as far as styling your own applications, and kind of wondering where the breakpoint you might suggest for when you would use something like this versus going and using a view and putting things in the corners and some of that automation was built into that.
Yeah, so the question is, yesterday I gave a presentation that was focused on how to solve small, specific design challenges when you're building web mapping applications. Like, how do you control where the docking happens? What happens when a pop-up docks and it's on top of a panel? So those are all small patterns and pieces. This is kind of like all of those pieces together in one, is the way to think about it. So for example, and then where is the line that you draw when you go to a framework like this from when you would create it from scratch? I would say if you need panels and nav components, then that's probably, and you need responsive behavior, that's probably a good set of requirements to go to a framework and to not piecemeal it together yourself. If you don't have all of those, then there's a good argument saying that you could build a div element with a few LIs in it and connect that to a panel yourself. But what about all the responsive stuff that Bootstrap is doing and everything else? So those are basically the pieces to the decision, the factors in the decision you'd have to make.
But the logic that you would need in it in terms of, well, I need a very sophisticated filter, I mean, that doesn't really matter. It just goes into a panel here.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, the choice is yours, and it kind of depends. This framework, I feel, is light enough that I can use this, and in a lot of the work that I do, I have to build applications in 3 to 4 hours sometimes. And I'm going to go to this. I'm not going to sit there and style, a nav and a panel and have it responsive and, just do all the things that that it really needs to do in an advanced framework. So, like for example, we just take this through its paces in a responsive design. It's got to work in all of these different, size devices, and it has to work well all the time. If that's the requirement, then I'm going to jump to one of these frameworks right away. Yep.
So if you need a style, like a button style, it's not part of your, so could you add Bootstrap? Is it an R or an and? My question, your Bootstrap versus
Where is the style coming from? Is the style already in Bootstrap, or is it just a style for your org? Then you wouldn't pull in my Bootstrap reference. You would pull in the Bootstrap you already have styled, and then the rest of the system is just going to...
Everything else would work.
Yeah. It's absolutely agnostic. I made sure of that. Yeah, because I recognize some, agencies have Bootstrap builds already, and just the 3 pieces that I built will work agnostic to whatever other styling you set up. Yeah.
Is there a way to download that styler after you do all the settings in your configurable app template?
There is not. The closest you can get to it is what I was showing you here with the share panel, right? And the share panel has the style settings in the URL. So yeah, maybe for the next version for Bootstrap 4, I'll consider an export import.
Because that's because you want to add. I want to add other business logic to it, right? I can't do it with this. I want to build the rest of the app.
Yep.
This sets the framework for the rest of the app.
Understood.
That's
Yep. So. Okay, anything else? One more. Yeah.
Yeah, you've done a lot of great work on this.
Thanks.
We discussed a code view last year that where it's just like this, that you can swap apps in and out of, which works really cool for that. Is that pretty much static, or is that the code actually in there? Is it viewer? So you say focus equals, and then it goes actually after an application, and then swaps in and out.
Sorry, what's swapping in and out?
Well, so the different HTML applications that you have this one Calcite Maps app.
Yep.
I believe you got code from you. Is that, so what if we call it styler? Is that this?
No. So Style Explorer is the thing I showed earlier on, which allows you to experiment with all the styles. This is Styler, the app template that's sitting in the ArcGIS cloud. It's also in the repository too, as well, so all the code is there. But it's sitting in the cloud and allows you to use the map viewer and the scene viewer to generate these types of applications. Yeah, so they're 2 separate things. They're named similarly, but they are different. Okay.
Can you show me how to get to the styler, like from ArcGIS.com again? Like you went and you set up a web map, and then you...
Sure. So I'm just in configuration mode here now. Let me see. Okay, so I have a web map open in this particular case. So you can start that. There's a few different ways to get there, and then I just went to share, create a web, and then just typed in styler. Yeah, and I got a couple extras, but you'll have just 2, or 1 probably, called Map Styler. Map Styler for 2D, and then when you're in the scene viewer, it'll be Scene Styler.
Okay, so mine comes with scene styler, and that's where it would...
Yeah. So yeah, it just depends what viewer that you're starting from.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I guess maybe a different way to phrase my original question would be, you've got the template there, and you say, well, In addition just to the banner on the top, I also need a credit panel where it's going to show a footer basically.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand, the point at which you're better off to go back to the JS API and style it there as opposed to trying to modify that template. Last year you showed me, okay, here's where you can put up, apply your own CSS in the Calcite Maps and bring that bottom panel up and just trying to get some sense of advice. Okay, well, once you need to add, a new panel, new section, you're probably better off to go back and build your own as opposed to customize what I already have here in Calcite Maps. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I think adding a panel, I've had a lot of requests for that because people show tables and stuff like that, and I think that's a very reasonable extension to the Calcite map. Absolutely, yeah. Especially if you want it to collapse and be, part of this the fluid, responsive system. I think that makes good sense.
It's worked well for me if I'm doing things like I got a legend panel or a filter panel or things that fit into that framework. In terms of okay, well now I need to add a persistent footer or something like that. It sounds like it still makes sense for you to modify what you've got in the Calcite map.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's what it's there for. It's like Bootstrap. Bootstrap just gives you the building blocks and you build it out. Calcite Maps is the same way. It gives you the building blocks and then you just build on and modify as you need. Absolutely.
What's the overlap between the Calcite Web and the Calcite Bootstrap on which you build the Calcite Maps?
Well, you have to be careful there because Calcite Web is our custom framework from the ground up, our custom grid system. Calcite Bootstrap is Bootstrap with a Calcite theme on top of it. And then Calcite Maps has nothing to do with Calcite Bootstrap. Yeah. No, it's built on pure Bootstrap. But it does the same thing that Calcite Bootstrap does, and that is it themes it following the Calcite pattern. And I chose to build it on pure Bootstrap just because it was more flexible for people and they could pull in Bootstrap. They wouldn't have to pull in, Calcite Bootstrap, because Calcite Bootstrap might not be what the customer wants at the end of the day. If they have their own styles, they have round corners, different themes and stuff like that, so that's why it's built on pure Bootstrap. Yeah, but it would work with Calcite Bootstrap, as confusing as that would be. It would totally work with it.